Hey everybody, it's Mick here from Climate Salad. We are doing yet another podcast to support the building of incredible climate solutions. And one of the areas that actually we don't talk nearly enough about, certainly increased in the last 10 years, but still not enough about, is actually about founder wellness. And someone I have had the pleasure of an introduction to is Jean Paul, known as JP. JP, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mick. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Now you do a lot of work in founder wellness, and it's a passion area of yours. You're actually really doing some material inputs to try to get some change here. Can you just give us the elevator pitch? Like what's the work you do before we delve into it? Give us a bit of tell us a bit about the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Would you want the elevator pitch or the why?
Let's start with the elevator pitch,
Okay, sure.
and
No, no worries.
then once we know what it is, then we'll say yeah, then we'll go into the
Absolutely,
why.
absolutely. So pretty much what I do is I've essentially, or I believe have created one of the first ever performance infrastructures for, founders, executives, and their teams. And essentially what we do is help founders, executives, and their teams pretty much improve their obviously decision making, reducing decision fatigue, improving their energy, which thereby obviously improves their performance for the company. But also, I think the deeper reasons, and more importantly, is obviously to make sure that they're actually able to manage their stress effectively so they can stay present with the people that they love as they grow and scale. And essentially, we deliver it through three main pillars. And we deliver it essentially into companies and exec teams in under 3 hours a week.
In under 3 hours a week.
Yes.
So, and is that to learn how to do it, or is that's to actually get the value out of it?
Yeah. So we're actually implementing it
Got it.
alongside them. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. It's yeah, there's a lot to talk about here, and I really want to get into it. And I do
Sure.
want to touch. I think there's a lot of whys to this as well. I think there's also a lot of conflicts and tensions, right? It's like there's I remember this saying, everybody should meditate half an hour a day, and if you don't have time for that, you should do an hour a day. Um, and it's one of those things. Founders are some of the busiest people in the world. They work really hard and they've just got so many pressures on them. And climate tech founders have this additional pressure of saving the planet or saving humanity. So
Absolutely.
the wellness and their well-being, I think, is a critical investment, and no one would question it. But everyone typically understands that it often gets sacrificed. And I like you're not talking about just like a bumper sticker or a or some sort of get up at 5 a.m. and have a ice
Yeah. No.
bath. Um, like, can you tell us a bit more about the infrastructure and those three pillars? Like, I think that's important. Like, I would need more than just an encouragement, right? And I can't
Absolutely.
afford a personal trainer, um, but like to come in every day and be my full-time coach, like billionaires. But yeah, can you tell us a bit more about how it actually works?
Of course. So, like I mentioned, we obviously have the three pillars that we go and implement with the founders, the executives, their teams, and then eventually, actually, we end up bleeding it out to their companies as well. I mean, under three
Okay.
hours a week. And these three pillars are one, performance capacity systems, two, on-demand executive support, and then three, the leadership OSs. So, like I mentioned, everything runs in under 3 hours a week. The goal is obviously not necessarily to add more pressure onto their plate, but it's more to obviously take away the things that they obviously don't want, right? Decision fatigue, not putting the time into the things that actually move the needle as best as physically obviously possible, and obviously the constant guilt of never necessarily being on top of everything and that unintentionally bleeding in back at home. Did you want me to explain each pillar as
Yeah,
well?
that'd be great.
Um,
Especially as a geek like me, I know what an OS is, but
yeah, yeah,
some people may not. So yeah, I
of
think that'd
course.
be really valuable. Obviously, it's your secret sauce and how it all works, but just a light introduction would be great.
Absolutely. So obviously the first, like I mentioned, were the performance capacity systems. So this is where essentially we help founders, executives, and their teams manage their energy, resilience, and clarity. So that way they can actually make sure that they're managing their stress effectively, but also optimizing performance, for the business. I'm sure you can attest there's times in which we're so focused in on doing work 24/7 that we end up not moving essentially the entire day, and that ends up obviously actually bleeding into how we actually perform. Because if you don't have that sort of outlet or something to help you balance it alongside that, it's really hard to stay focused and actually do efficient work versus what I think a lot of people say busy work. So the way in which we go about it is one, obviously there's a element of training in there, but it's all, tailored towards obviously the person's individual and preferences. But whether it be for weights, for example, we'd make sure that we're actually optimizing it around their schedule for performance, not necessarily, doing too much volume where they're overextending themselves, but just enough so that way they'd actually make sure that they feel good, they're recovering well, and they're actually mentally on point. Obviously, there's a nutrition aspect in there as well. We obviously align everyone with a tailored meal plan to help them actually improve, their brain function more over than just obviously losing fat or building muscle, right? So that way they can actually optimize their performance. But alongside this, for that layer of convenience, we add in done for you meal prep. So I've got contacts with meal prep companies in which we actually go and send meal prep to the teams and obviously the founders on a weekly basis. So that way it thereby removes the need for prepping, right? That time aspect, but also the worrying about what to eat and when to eat. And also it obviously tastes quite good too. So it's another um, big pro to it. And then tailored supplementation as well. We're working with another company called Bionic, and they tailor all your supplementation based on your blood work, but also strategic questionnaires. So that way they know what you're deficient in, what you're not deficient in, and make sure that they're actually, you're getting all the vitamins and minerals you actually need versus just buying random supplements off the shelf. And then they also we have a wearable in there, so that way we can actually track data effectively and efficiently, so we can see how well they're sleeping, how well they're recovering, and then what adjustments we actually need to make based on actual tangible data versus obviously just the standard, how much are we weighing, how do you feel, blah, 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 blah. So that's the first one. Sorry, I
Yeah.
know I explained it
No,
in a
that's
lot of
good.
depth.
That's really really helpful. I think it's
Yeah,
yeah. I think there's gonna be different reactions to this. So some people will be like, I can't, I don't have time for this, and other people say they need to invest time in it. So I think it's good to know how it differs from just from
of course.
all the from other alternatives, other approaches. So yeah. What about the second one?
Absolutely. So the second one, obviously, on-demand executive support. So at this stage, I'm working one-on-one with most of the companies, but also the founders within the executives and the teams. So essentially making sure that they're on point, no matter what. We align on weekly calls, obviously. So it's typical accountability, but we do adapt everything in real time based on whether they're traveling, whether they're going overseas, and, based on their bandwidth at the time aligned on their calendar. So pretty much we make ensure everything actually makes sense for where they're actually at, versus something that is unrealistic for them. Because say for example, one of the founders that we're working with at this stage is going traveling. He may not have the same access to equipment. He may not, obviously, due to time zone, his sleep obviously pattern will change. So we need to align all that effectively, so that way they can maintain performance, but also stay on top of everything. So that way things don't fall off. So we also deliver it. We have like obviously an individual dedicated Slack channel for each company, and each executive within the team. So that way, obviously, things are communicated effectively and efficiently. But there's also, uh, they can message or call me whenever. So that's just, yeah, it's a pretty standard, I guess, accountability per se. But I think the most important thing is actually making sure it's adaptive to founder situations, because as being a founder yourself, obviously being a founder myself, we are constantly on the go and things continuously change. So yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, that's yeah. Again, for someone like me who I think my perception of this kind of stuff is totally different now versus when I was a founder in my 20s and 30s. Actually, I've got it's harder. I think I needed it more then, but and there wasn't really spoken about that. Just sort of well-being wasn't really a big thing back then, and there was lots of issues, mental health issues and otherwise. And now I really I've got a decent amount of systems around me, but it's I have a increased respect for it all. So. Okay, and the third part,
and the third part, leadership OSs. So
operating
obviously
systems, right? Yeah, yeah.
operating system, sorry, yes, just to clarify with everyone. Um, but essentially living frameworks to help leaders, not just obviously, like I said, it's more than just improving their physical health and mental health, but it's actually helping them learn how to perform better under pressure, communicate more clearly with their team, communicate more clearly with, their partner or even people at home, but also more importantly, stay physically present at work for your team, but obviously at home as well. So we have, and we deliver this through a Notion. So we've built, complete Notion hubs for each team and obviously each individual founder, depending on whether we're working with them one-on-one or with the entire team at once. And essentially, we've got a full stack of education modules that refresh every quarter, tailored towards obviously the individual team, individual founder. So that way, obviously, things evolve and they continuously improve. Um, all these things, like I said, so improving their decision fatigue, improving how they perform, but also more importantly, those sort of tangible business, I guess, tactics or anything along those lines to help improve how you show up as a leader, um, and not let everything else, I guess, come
Yeah.
into obviously you obviously we're all busy and
Yeah.
it's yeah, so
Yeah. 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 It's a lot, isn't it? It's
it is.
and I think that um I remember reading in my early 20s about sharpening the saw and working on and people talk about working on the business work versus in the business, but and there's working
And
on yourself
yeah,
versus just working. And there's a temptation. The old story is, I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy sawing. And it's like, well, you've got it. You at some point that value of that soaring goes down significantly. And the same thing for founders. I think there's also a different. It's very different over time. So you can go 3 months full powering, working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, and not much exercise, bad food. You can probably do 3 months, but 6 months you're getting less sleep, you're being less productive. 9 months, absolutely, and it's it was described to me as like it's a sprint that needs to become a marathon pretty quickly.
100%.
Most businesses are 10-year journeys, so it's you think about that you're surviving a marathon by pace, not by pacing yourself, not by running full pelt all the time. So yeah, that's so. And can you in terms of your um the why, like what are some of the big benefits that people get out of this? Like what's the change that happens? And what's
I
hard
mean,
about it? Like I know that as well.
yeah, I think the most difficult thing that people, I think it's obviously similar to what you've obviously already expressed, Mick, is that is there actually a need for this? You know what I mean? And like I feel like the unfortunate reality is people realize that they actually need help or that they need to get these things sorted earlier rather than later when it's too late. And that obviously was really apparent to me growing up because I'll get into the whole reason why I've obviously came into this angle. But I mean, obviously, I think as you know my father, Mick, but
Yeah,
growing up, he obviously started he went across his obviously entrepreneurial journey throughout tech, throughout sustainability, and obviously throughout all these things. But obviously, as a founder, and obviously probably as a founder yourself, you can attribute that, if you don't take care of yourself, you don't necessarily know how to manage your stress as best as physically possible. The way you show up, unfortunately, unintentionally bleeds into everyone around you, and that actually thereby leads you to, not being able to show up. I mean, as best as possible, not just for the business, but actually for, the people that you love to. And growing up, that was pretty apparent, obviously, within the household because obviously dad was so stressed all the time. Um, he didn't take care of himself and he didn't know how, and maybe potentially had that, I guess, understanding that he didn't necessarily need to because he was
right.
working so hard. And as a result of that, obviously, it brought a lot of tension within the household. And not that he's a obviously bad father at all, but it obviously you know caused a lot of tension. And then from there, I realized throughout my entrepreneurial journey growing up that I was embodying a lot of those same habits too. And I realized this was a massive pattern. And I realized that, this probably shouldn't actually continue out because I've seen it continue out within my own life, but I've even with all these execs and obviously companies that I've worked with, it's just apparent that, you know, because we're so focused on our work that all the people around us unintentionally take the hit of everything, and and we're, I guess, not as physically as on point as we can be for them, even though they're the ones who've got us through it, I guess,
Mm,
throughout the entirety of the point in time from when you first started to when you do finally start seeing success, you know what I'm saying? So I guess that's
yeah.
the deeper reason why.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I grew up with my parents running their own business. It wasn't, I wouldn't call it a startup, but it was yeah, they started it, kind of started from scratch, and it was pretty stressful for a while, and it probably influenced me to become an entrepreneur as well. And I think back then it actually, and certainly experience I went through wasn't like a high stress, high growth startup, but it definitely had the pressures of that versus a job. But everything has pressures and trade-offs. But it certainly exposed me in terms of the value of running your own business and building it over a long period of time, which was successful for my parents. But it does. It just I think there's an opportunity to do better, right? Which is be entrepreneurial and make a change you want to make. And again, back to climate, really particularly, there's lots of problems to solve. So that calls on people to be entrepreneurial. But I think the bringing a set of tools that help you do that in a way which is healthier for the long term. It should be healthier for your business and then healthier for the outcome as well. And I think there's sometimes this hustle culture of, again, get up at 5 a.m., do 1,000 push-ups, have an ice bath, and work 40 hours a day. And I think it's raise as much venture capital as you can and just grow, grow, grow. I think there's a problem with that being normalized and being like and idolized versus running a business and growing it as best you can. So and growing it at pace and owning it yourself and not raising any capital, right? So yeah, I
100%.
think there's definitely different approaches, which I think are needed.
Absolutely, no, absolutely me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about, is there a particular case study you might be able to tell us about a company where you've had a good impact or an experience you can share?
We're about to work with a big company, but just out of privacy for them, I don't really
Of
want to, like,
course. Of
obviously
course.
discuss it. But
Yeah.
it's funnily enough an ESG company.
Okay.
And they're obviously deploying in a country, and they're going and working to improve the sustainability and help
Yeah.
them hit the sustainability goals by 2030. And pretty much we've embedded the whole executive OS essentially within the company thus far,
Nice.
and we're slowly starting to bleed it out over the next 5 to 7 years with them.
Oh,
Um,
great.
so pretty cool, pretty cool. And then we've obviously worked a lot one-on-one,
Yep.
a lot of founders up to this point. But for example, I worked with an executive based in the UK. We've just stopped, obviously, as of recent, but we worked for each other for about 3 to 6 months, and within those first, obviously, that first quarter, he ended up dropping 6 kilos, dropping 6% body fat. He actually reversed his vascular age by 5 years,
Wow.
which is quite significant. But I think the most important thing was that because he was able to hone in these habits, that he didn't have in prior. Like, he was sleeping like and having midday naps like all the time, which obviously wasn't good for his productivity and how
Mm,
he obviously went and I guess interacted with his team. But more importantly, I think when he came home, he was obviously very irritable. He was tired. He was moody. And once we embedded all these things alongside obviously the physical changes, he's he was obviously more present with his kids
mm,
and his family, and they obviously noticed that he was able to actually play with them more. But I think more importantly, even his team, they were all saying like how amazing he's been to work with, and how well he's actually led the team once he honed all these things in versus how he was prior, if that makes
yeah,
sense. So
right.
there's a real big, I guess, change in the way he actually led and obviously delivered for the team as well, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think look, it's great to see your work. I think it's really necessary. And I certainly in climate again, I see increased personal pressure and emotion to it because of the climate angle. And not to say that all entrepreneurs don't have an element of that, but certainly I know there's an additional or a different element for climate tech companies. So, JP, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to get this out to the climate salad world,
Sure.
I'm sure there's a couple of founders who are scaling up that might need some additional support.
Oh, thank you.
But thanks for stepping in there and applying your skills and this the process and the methodology. Hopefully, we can get back on maybe next year and talk about some of the success stories you've had in climate tech companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Would love it.
JP, thanks so much for sharing
Thank
today.
you, Mick.
Oh, so
Thank you.
what's the website? How do people find out about you? We'll put it in the show
Uh,
notes, but
yeah, so no official website, but I do have my LinkedIn.
okay.
So that's just my name, Jean Paul Gonios.
Yep. Find
And
JP on LinkedIn and
that's
connect
pretty much it.
and
Yeah.
then tell him Climate Sale sent you and we'll see how the see how it all goes. So
That's
JP
it.
again, thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you, Mick. Appreciate you.